I think it's time for us to continue our program, right? And I think right now we have a fun part, and it will be followed with other fun parts. But John Waterhouse and Mary Marshall will talk about their work in the various parts of the Arctic and outside the Arctic. I think it's very kind of interesting combination of experiences that in many ways talks to what we've been discussing here, but also kind of highlights other elements that I think we need to be thinking of tomorrow as well. So, John, please.
Okay, I might roam around a little bit. And I might lose track. I was up all night last night, kind of sick. But let's go through this. So, you all know I'm John Waterhouse. This is my wife, Mary Marshall. And we work around the world with indigenous people. Myself, that's what we look like when we're working sometimes. Myself, I'm Skalallam Chippewa Cree, and my mother's Scottish. So I'm a bit of a mutt stretched across the entire continent. Mary is a photographer and an author. And so we got together, and it kind of works out for both of us. And we got married along the way. So,
and I'm a mutt too.
some of the things in our background, though, we work with National Geographic. We're National Geographic explorers. They don't pay us, so it's really not a paying gig with them. So don't ever go there. I'm also, though, I've had a great honor and privilege of a lot of things in my life. I'm a retired Navy Chief Petty Officer. I'm a presidential appointee for President Obama. Just lots of crazy things. But at the same time as I say that, and I tell youth this, I'm also, I only finished the 9th grade. And I tell them, you don't have to stay there. You know, you can move on, and you don't have to just be a high school dropout. In my case, I went along and I didn't finish school, immediately got into a lot of trouble with the law, and was given a choice of going in the military or going to prison. And this was way back a long time ago. They don't do that anymore. And so I chose the military, ended up in the Navy, and spent a 20-year career. So it kind of changed things for me completely. So kind of a crazy story. Mary, self-taught photographer, self-taught author, started her own publishing company. So crazy stuff that happens to you in your life where you end up here today. But let's talk about some of the things we do out on this beautiful place we call our planet. The big blue marble, or the tiny marble, depending on your perspective. And it's a place we all truly love, I know that. As we kind of zoom in, though, we find that Native people have filled almost every niche there is on this planet. I suspect one day we'll find out that Native people were on Antarctica long before anybody knew about it. This is on the Zeraft River, which is a tributary to the White Nile in Africa, South Sudan, an incredible place. But we also occupied the deserts of the southwest in the United States, but also the Sahara, the Namib, the Kalahari. We occupied all the islands in some way. I still don't understand how we got to New Zealand or Australia 50,000 years ago, who knows? We also terraformed these places into places that we could actually live. This is a fish pond in Hawaii. They've now identified 1,400 fish ponds in Hawaii. This one's roughly 800 years old, some 800 acres basically. And this was aquaculture at its finest. An amazing thing. We occupied the jungles in the Amazonian basin, but all across the planet. in beautiful places like this. This is the Pongo de Manique in Peru. And the high Arctic, a place we're all very familiar with. But at the same time, as we occupied all these places and we were all across the entire planet, we've suffered some pretty heavy oppression, whether it was religious. This is a codex from the Mayan culture, and somehow those monks, friars, however you want to call them, they thought this was blasphemous. I think there's only about 5 of these left. Imagine the library of knowledge we lost when they burned all these. Some of it was political. Somehow I think the Soviets just weren't too keen on Native people. That's what I hear. And some of it was a combination of political and religious, like we experienced in this country. Wasn't a really great time for us. As this went along, though, this idea, it sort of became this thing where we were just kind of relegated to museum pieces. Like these petroglyphs here, where I read recently, and I know everyone knows this guy, E.O. Wilson, said that history only goes back as far as literacy, and then before that it goes to archaeologists and anthropologists and the like. I beg to differ, because just because we don't know how to read that, we don't understand that language, does not mean that that's not a document no different than that book back there on that desk back there. I'd love to sit down and talk with him sometime. Or this petroglyph in Arizona, and they believe that has something to do with trade, and they believe that bird there was a macaw. Yeah, we documented our lives. We honored our dead with these mortuary poles at Guayhanas. And all of this was with Native people. Well, we're still here. After all that, we're still here. These are more modern carvings. We're still here in the sense that this man still has his culture and still believes in it deeply. That you would be invited into the community by this enthusiastic young man. You'd be fed well. I promise you that. This is way up in northern Saskatchewan. We were headed into the beach with a couple of canoes. 2 moose broke out of the brush. 10 minutes later, we had 2 moose on the ground, and everybody was eating. Everybody was welcome. We still carve. We still believe in our cultures that are very family-based. I know in some experiences in the Native world, especially here in the United States, it's tough to have a family and really have your family-based culture. But as a whole, in the indigenous world, it really is family-based. It's a family unit all the way across. In families that responsibility starts early in life, like this young man in Siberia who has the responsibility of 300 of those reindeer before he goes to school every morning. They'd call that child abuse in this country, but just the same there, they really truly believe in this. Or this young woman here in South Sudan who works every day very hard for her family preparing food. Or my favorite little machete girls that collect different fruits and vegetable matter out in the jungle every day. And I love this photo. Mary took this down in Peru. And I just know if that was taken here in the United States, somebody would call Child Protective Services. So those are pretty big machetes for little girls to be walking around with. But it's common for them. We had science beyond the imagination, I believe. Another thing I read recently that science, roughly modern science, goes back 500 years roughly to Isaac Newton. That was the beginning of modern science. Well, again, Our science went back thousands of years. This is outside of Cusco. This was an agricultural research station by the Inca. They were around for a little while, which might have given us these potatoes. Here in the United States, we have, 3 kinds of potatoes that we eat? Something like that. There are over 400 kinds of potatoes out on the planet. They come in all shapes, varieties, colors, and tastes. They're used for food. They're used for medicinal purposes. It's amazing. I'm sure we've all heard of curare. Our botanists have. I know they have. You know, that's kept in emergency wards here in the United States. I'm not sure exactly what they use it for, but it's something they keep in the emergency wards to stabilize people. 80% of our drugs these days here in the United States are synthesized from stuff they learned from these native healers. Animal husbandry, we understood, completely understood, and still today. I mean, in Alaska, these would be called caribou. In other parts of the world, they're reindeer because they've been domesticated. And we understood how to travel. Now, this is a modern version of this vessel here. And Noah Thompson is leading an effort where this boat is going around the world on a 4-year trip without modern navigation. A great friend of mine, Matahi from New Zealand, is a traditional navigator, an amazing guy. And I kind of joke with him. It's like, what is it, Matahi? You just go down to the next wave, take a left, and you go to Hawaii? He says, yeah, it's kind of like that. But you imagine these people a long time ago, they completely colonized the Polynesian Islands and Hawaii. Can you imagine you're sitting around down in some place, you name it, New Zealand or one of the Polynesian Islands? It would be more, with a vessel like this, it would be more difficult than what we're trying to do right now, go to Mars. Because they didn't know they were going to go to Hawaii. They just said, we're going to go navigate to some place and find something. We know we're going to Mars. These guys got in their vessel. They had no compass, no GPS, no Loran Sea, you name it. They had traditional navigators that sat basically back in this part of the vessel here and navigated that vessel across the ocean all the way to Hawaii and colonized Hawaii. The amazing thing about this is they tell me these guys can, these navigators can experience 26 different waveforms affecting the hull of that vessel as they go through the ocean. And they can tell you very accurately that there's an island over there, 200 kilometers over to our right. Let's sail over there. I don't know how they do it. Next left. What's that? Bare feet, yeah. I guess it's just that. Take a left at the next wave and you're on your way. An amazing thing though, we had science beyond belief. We also stepped into the metaphysical world where we really truly believed our connection to the physical world we can see and beyond that was important to us. We were connected to nature. We didn't separate ourselves from it. We didn't live in a square box where we had a button that made it warm or cold depending on our need. We lived within nature. We understood we were part of the environment, not separate from the environment. We didn't set out to conquer the environment. We had a deeper understanding, I believe, than we have today. Even with all our scientific advances, I think we had a deeper understanding of what the natural world's about and our place in it. We truly tried to expand that knowledge, though. There are shaman or natural healers now that we're going to introduce to some of our astrophysicists and people like that from NASA that truly believe they know beyond the stars. These shaman have traveled there. They know they have. It'll be an interesting conversation. This knowledge was documented in some ways through dance, music, or song like these young Evenki singers from the Saha Republic. And people truly respected their elders. Vast warehouses of knowledge that people need to listen to, even in the modern world with the University of Dad. And they knew how to appreciate what they had. They truly believed in things beyond them. So, what do Mary and I do with all this? Some years back, Native people came to us and said, go out and take the pulse of the planet, take the pulse of the river. And in typical Native fashion, they didn't give us the rule book or the instruction manual. They just said, go away, go do it. We thought we were pretty brilliant. We got a couple of canoes. We were going to go down the Yukon River and just talk with people in every community about the environment and environmental stewardship and the like. And right before we went, though, it just didn't make sense. We spent a whole year planning. Right before we went on the first trip, I sat the team down and I said, this isn't going to work. This is not going to work. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, the Native people are going to get it. But I said, there's no way for the non-Native people to connect to this. There's no way for them to understand what we're trying to accomplish here. And they said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, we got to give a way for them to connect, something they can understand. So let's use science. They said, yeah, okay, what do you want to do? And I said, well, now this is how brilliant I was. I thought, well, I told them, I said, I've seen you guys taking those water samples. We'll just get some bottles, and I'll take them along, and if we see some ugly water, I'll grab some of it, and you guys can analyze it. And they said, yeah, right, that's not going to work. That's not science, John. I said, okay, well, plan B. I said, I'm a retired Navy Chief Petty Officer. And whether I was at 30,000 feet or I was underwater, I had sensors that told me about the environment around me. It's what kept me alive. So I said, I want a sensor, and I want it quick. We were leaving in 3 weeks. YSI came through. They gave us a beautiful, huge probe, like $25,000 probe. We almost gave it back to them because it was so expensive. They said, no, we make lots of them. If you lose it, it's no big deal. I said, all right. We modified it right away. We built our own computer programs, threw the probe over the back of the canoe, solar powered everything, put in telemetry equipment so we could broadcast our results in real time, and down the river we went. My very kind scientist that we work with said, when you left, John, we were waving at you guys like, there goes the crazy people. When we got to the other end of the Yukon River and we pulled out, they were there to meet us, and they said, oh, my God, look what you guys have done. We said, what? And they said, you've created a water profile of the entire river system at the river speed. I said, nobody's ever done that before. It was kind of a mistake, but just the same, it worked out really well for us. So we took that on the road to other places around the world. And in the interest of time, I'm going to focus on the Arctic a little bit, because that's what we're talking about here. And you would not believe how difficult it is to get a photo from NASA straight down on the Arctic. You can get 50 of them of Antarctica, like 2 of the Arctic, and they're not straight down from the top. I don't get it. I guess we're being ignored. But you'll travel to beautiful places like this with us. This is the mouth of the Yukon. It's 3 miles, really. The McKenzie, the mighty McKenzie, or the Lena River in Siberia. Incredible places. If you've traveled in the Arctic, in Russia anyway, you've probably rode in one of these. It's like my absolute favorite vehicle. Over there, we travel on ships at times. You know, there's not a lot of, what would we say, private, public type transportation. Not a lot of private stuff, especially. You can't just go down and hire an airplane and go flying anywhere you want in Russia. And We travel a lot on the rivers there, especially the Lena. They didn't want us traveling in the little 16-foot boats. Have you guys been over there? There's these little tin boats that are everywhere that are really junk, and they're kind of dangerous. So they didn't want us traveling in that. We had quite a ways to go. So they just called in a whole ship for us and said, there you go. You got a ride now. Away we go. And traveling along in incredible places like this, that's probably about 300 feet high, that embankment. It goes for miles and miles and miles. This ship that picked us up, the morning they picked us up, they told us that we'll be there at midnight. And, you know, that turned into 6 o'clock in the morning after us staying up all night. The skipper got on, he turned on all his lights, and he got on his microphone and said, get out here, I'm not going to slow down. Just come on out and jump on the ship. So Mary got to do her best impression of a superhero. We zipped out to the boat. As this guy's just cruising past, we had to basically slam into the side of the boat and jump onto a ladder and climb up about 30 feet to the deck with all our gear. It was awesome. I was standing off at another boat watching. I was like, wow, it was amazing. Sometimes they let her drive, and they're very welcoming of us to do that. Travel in the Arctic, you guys all know, can be challenging at times, where your truck ends up on the top. And the accommodations there, a lot of people wouldn't accept this, but this is better than any 5-star I've ever stayed in. And in the Arctic, you know, the landscapes, they're vast, they're beautiful, and huge. That's our little tiny canoe down at the bottom there. And you probably recognize this as an Inukshuk. But stopping here for a second to talk about this. As we've traveled in these places, the native people have come to us and said, help us understand our environment in a modern scientific context. Help us monitor it, and then help us explain it to the governments and the developers and the companies that we work with. So, you know, what we see in the native world is you can go into a government and say our fish and birds are dying. They're like, yeah, nice natives, go away. Because you can't explain it to them as scientifically. You have to talk in their language, and we've learned that. Native people have come to us and said, please teach us how to do this. So we've taken it on as part of the project where we're asked to go to bring that technology to them and allow them to be able to monitor their environment. Starting with the youth, usually, they're very interested. That's where all our hope for the future is, of course. And they are very, very, very good at this. They all want to be involved, even doing GIS mapping. I think as long as he thought he was going to hold that antenna a little higher, it was going to work better. I don't know. And the adults, they want to do this too. They want to be able to explain this to people, what's going on in their environment, what's wrong with their water. These people are building baselines in case something does happen to their environment, so they'll know where they started from. And it's spreading all around the world. I'm very hopeful. An important part of the work, though, as we talk about native people, though, is not just the modern science, the things we can measure and quantify. It's also listening to what people like this have. This is my friend Augustine, Mary and our friend Augustine down in Peru. Listening to the elders, these vast warehouses of knowledge, these libraries, really. Or Maria. She has 8 sons and a husband. She runs a reindeer camp, and she knows everything about the Arctic, I swear. There is nothing that escapes her attention, and the 8 sons and husband definitely jump to her voice. We have Dokia, our great friend, some 90 years old, a Venke woman who understands more about the Arctic than Maria. She'll spend hours talking with you about things in the Arctic and how things were, how things are now. Or Norma. Now, Norma's close to 90 years old. That's her four-wheeler. She is the absolute fastest four-wheel driver I know. She rides that thing wide open all day long. But the cool thing about her, when I sit and listen with her, is she tells me she can remember listening to her 90-year-old grandmother when she was 10 years old, telling about her 90-year-old grandmother when she was 10 years old. So very quickly, you're almost 300 years back in history, just in that one local spot. She can tell you about the birds that don't come there anymore, how the willows are moving north, how the ice used to be on the Yukon, I don't know, 5 feet thick, 6 feet thick, 10 feet thick in the winter. Doesn't happen anymore. She can tell you that. So if you parachute in today, you wouldn't know that. The ice doesn't get quite that thick anymore. She can tell you about that, though. Or Mary. Remember, we didn't go anyplace in all these years. Mary still knows her culture from the very word go and how to cut up moose while talking on her modern cell phone to her grandchildren about their math assignment. She's an amazing woman. But it's also important to listen to the youth of today and what their hopes, dreams, and desires are for the planet and the future. But how do you do all this? This is an oral tradition, an oral society. I mentioned earlier to the folks I was sitting with, it's just been translated. It took 10 years to translate something in Siberia. It's called the Olongho. The largest one I know of right now is 50,000 lines of poetry. And you basically have to be qualified to do this because you have to recite it from memory. It explains their entire culture, this 50,000 lines of poetry. It's in a performance where if you're the person reciting it, you might have somebody singing with you, but you have to act out every part in the performance, every part of that poetry, whether you're a hero or you're a woman or you're the wind or you're the water. Embedded in that, though, is the very DNA of those people and a vast amount of knowledge. Well, there's smaller versions, a little more manageable, that deal with the science of their area, the biology of their area, the ecology of their area, and we barely know about it. UNESCO has given it a certification, but they've only just translated this into English, just recently. It took them 10 years to do it. It's knowledge that we've barely looked at. Well, listening to the youth, how are we going to do all this? Well, that's where Mary really helps me out a lot. Most of these photographs are hers. Still photography and video photography are ways to do it. This is our great friend Chris Rainier teaching the Machienga people how to use this HD digital video device where they can basically document their story on the planet and share it with other people, and they turn it has a software in it where you can make the story the way you want it. You can edit it and the whole works. And they were so quick to pick it up, it was crazy. You know, people really did question us the first time we did this. Oh, they're Native people, they might not get this. Huh. They picked it up in like 10 minutes, and they were telling us stories right away. These are ways we can document this, and then compare it to the scientific knowledge we're documenting through all our sensors and all our modern technology. See where the parallels are, see where the dots connect. And spending days videoing these people, this is Augustine again, with some people that we brought along, professional videographers, that tell the story of this fascinating place called the Pongo de Manique, which just over here is a huge whirlpool where their whole creation story, their life and death, exist in that whirlpool. They tell me this area that we're sitting in here is about 5 square miles, and it's in the top 10 of the most biologically diverse areas on the whole planet. So, I'm not a good Christian, but I would say that's close to a Garden of Eden there, at least in Augustine's mind. And through this, around the world, no matter where we go with the youth, the word selfie or Instagram are ubiquitous. This is the way the youth of today communicate. And I know most of us are too old, but we shouldn't be. We really need to pay attention to these guys because they're communicating at light speed, and we need to catch up. Yeah, no? And they're communicating with their elders through the same process. Twitter, Instagram, selfie, no matter where you go. You know, 10 years ago when I went to Native communities, very few people had anything other than maybe a landline telephone. Some of the communities might have had one sat phone for the whole community. These days, holy smokes. You go through the community and all the kids are like this or like this. And even in some of the most remote communities. Pretty cool, actually. Our intent, though, is to connect the world through the Native people and truly connect all across the planet. We can do it digitally, but really, 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 truly, we have to be able to do this. We have to be able to feel each other. We're humans. That's how we work. There's no way to escape that. Including warlords in South Sudan. You have to be able to talk to them too. We can't leave anybody out. I don't care who they are. It can be a businessman or a warlord in South Sudan. We need them all to get this right. This fascinating woman here, she lives in Costatum. Fascinating woman. She's a World War II hero and the best sewer in their whole area. And really spend time with these people and listen to them. Jimmy, what a guy up in the Northwest Territories. Or even the children. We really do need to connect all around the world and truly connect with the youth and the elders. And as we connect, it's beginning to cause great happiness all around the world in the Native community. And if you'll indulge me, everybody please stand up. We've been sitting all day. We've been stuck in a building. Oh my gosh. Oh, come on up. This is audience participation. Put your hand up like this. Oh, there we go. Now check that out. You hold the microphone. I'll talk. Go ahead. Connect to somebody next to you, folks. Now feel that energy. You're touching somebody you've never touched before. It's amazing. This is a very human thing to do. Psychologists will tell you the same. It's a calming effect for humans to touch each other. Oh, go ahead. Keep your hands up. Because if we get this right and we all connect together and start really, truly taking care of this planet, it's going to cause happiness amongst all my little friends like this guy, or this guy, or this cute little guy, this guy, this cute little frog, or this bug, or this guy even. We have to include everybody, like I said. We'll actually be able to save the rhinoceros. I really, truly believe that. These sleepy lions, one of my cute little friends out in the forest, but most importantly, we'll be able to give a future to these guys, the youth. And when we get this right, they'll be dancing. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you very, very much. It's always inspiring to see the story like that, and you know how things could be changed to the better, I guess, through collaboration and work and appreciation of different knowledge systems and cultures and things like that. Do you have any questions by any chance? Yes, Mike?
Thank you, John and Mary. So given that the central theme of this particular workshop deals with big data, I'm wondering if you could give us a little bit of information, if you have it, on how the scientists are using all your reams and reams of data that are being generated from the Yukon and elsewhere.
So let's start with the Yukon. So on the Yukon, we worked directly with USGS, and there's 14 years worth of data now on the monitoring the Yukon, and that's all warehoused at USGS. Now, my understanding there is their database is somewhat difficult to use. You would agree? Yeah, I would too. So we are now working beyond them. Mary and I are now at the Oregon Health and Science University, and on the floor we work on, it's a whole room, a giant room like this, full of database people that are working with us to look into how we can create not another database, but something better. And we're also working with the University of Idaho and the people down at University of San Diego, what's that place? University of California, San Diego, about what I would call the next generation database. For our people like this in the native communities, you know, a database looks pretty cool to a lot of scientists, and you know, and they'll print out a sheet to me that's a data sheet. I can't read at all. I don't know what it says. But, and that's the same for these people. You know, the numbers, you know, I joke with scientist friends, and I know you guys are scientists and you'll understand this, but, you know, they get excited when things change by 0.001. And I'm like, doesn't make sense. And it really, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything to people that are just living on the land. So, we're looking at hopefully creating what we would call the next generation of database. And we're working with some guys at University of Idaho that are basically visualization people. And if you think about it, I can't play video games either. I'm really bad at that. But, and it's not a video game, but using that technology to bring the data alive and make it three-dimensional, where we could give a presentation in the community, maybe on a screen like this or on a computer screen, where it has some depth to it beyond a data sheet, where they can really feel the data and see the data and manipulate it. So that's where we're headed with all this. Right now, though, like I said, 14 years worth of data at USGS, and then we've collected quite a bit of data that is at OHSU with us now, and Charles Seaton, a great guy there, is making it into the traditional database, which includes data from the Lena River, the Amazon and some of its tributaries, and then the Peel River in Northwest Territories, the McKenzie River, the Stewart, the Tanana, the Kayakuk, several different rivers around the, Alaska and in the Arctic. Still work in progress, but soon we hope. Does that? Yeah, okay, good.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, are you sure? Well, wonderful. Thank you very, very much.